Mimi, I don't know if you guys can hear it or not because there's construction down the street from me. They're working on some traffic lights or something like that. All I know is there's a huge detour. But it's kind of fitting because we're talking about something that feels like it's straight out of Looney Tunes itself, the Roadrunner. Galarian Zapdos. So Galarian Zapdos here is a fighting flying type, which means unfortunately it doesn't share the same defensive typing that regular Zapdos has with its electric flying, but I digress. Fighting flying gives us an immunity to ground. It has a 4 times resistance to bug. It resists dark, fighting, and grass. And then we're weak to electric, ice, fairy, psychic, and flying. Now that's alright because Galarian Zapdos here is meant to be a fast hitting sweeper. Going into Zapdos' stats here, we have 90 HP like all 6 of the birds, Kantonian and Galarian, have had so far, 125 physical attack, and that's one thing that sets it aside from the other 5 birds is Galarian Zapdos here is meant to be physical. It does not really care about its special attack, although it does have an 85 special attack, so hey, I don't know its coverage as far as the special side goes, but if you wanted to, I guess you could make something work, but don't. Don't follow that meme. It's like if you get the grumblies and the tumblies for the raw chicken. Don't do it. So, as far as the rest of our stats go, we have 90 in both our physical and special defense and 100 speed. Now, like I mentioned, Galarian Zapdos here is meant to be a fast-hitting sweeper. It's got great stab options in fighting and flying. It does a lot of damage to a lot of things, and thanks to its ability Defiant, much like Galarian Articuno's competitive, Zapdos will get an attack boost by 2 stages each time it gets one of its stats lowered by the opponent. And just to throw back to the Articuno video, if you didn't see that yet, I did talk about how you can skill swap Intimidate onto the opponent to forcibly activate competitive. You can do the same with Defiant. The only thing though is Defiant will only give you a +1 because one stage from the attack will be dropped, unfortunately. So that is a thing, but you could still do it. You could also throw the Adrenaline Orb on if you wanted to increase your speed that way too, but I digress. There's other ways around getting Zapdos' attack up that we're going to be looking into. If at anything, Defiant is just a nice bonus in case your opponent wants to intimidate you. So before I jump into the spreads here on screen, I do want to make a quick note. There is a large detour where all the construction is going, so therefore there's a lot of cars going up and down my street. So you probably will be hearing some cars going through here, and hopefully it's not as bad for you guys as it is me. Honestly though, what could be worse is getting kicked by Galarian Zapdos here, because look at those monstrous feet on this thing. Like, man, those things are huge. But I digress. Let's jump into the first spread, and it's going to be a rather simple and hopefully effective spread. We have a jolly nature with max attack investment and max speed investment. The idea here is 177 is a fairly respectable number to have for our damage output, and 167 is a great number to have with Tailwind. With Tailwind, you're able to outspeed max invested Timid Regieleki as well as Timid max invested Booster Energy, Fluttermane, and Iron Bundle. And the number is just so far wide that it's actually a comfortable margin right there. If you run Adamant, which I would have said was a decent argument, you would have had 194 attack and 152 speed, but you lose both the Bundle and Fluttermane matchup with Zapdos. And that could be relatively bad because then you would have to kind of rely on terastallizing potentially early because you tend to see both Fluttermane and Bundle as leads. Regieleki would probably be a common lead once Regulation D starts, which while you still outspeed that, that could be a problem if you burn your Terra too early. So just keep that in mind. The nice thing about running Jolly is it is safer since you do outspeed all of them. And because of Defiant, you don't really have to worry about losing the difference between 194 versus 177 because you're still getting a +2 attack each time your stat gets lowered right there. And if you get intimidated while you do effectively only get the +1, the nice thing is you're still going up in your damage output. And on top of that, Zapdos has a beautiful signature move in the form of Thunderous Kick. It's a base 90 fighting type move. It has a guaranteed chance to lower the target's defense stat by 1 stage. So if they survive taking the first Thunderous Kick, you're going to lower their defense, which means you're effectively raising your own attack by going for a follow-up damaging move. And that best part is because it's a debuff into the opponent, in order for them to clear it, they have to switch out or risk taking more damage, whether it be from Zapdos or Zapdos' partner. On top of that, we have Brave Bird, which is great 120 physical flying stab right there at the cost of some recoil. Then we could run Protect to help keep us around. And the nice thing here is with the fighting and flying type coverage, we're actually resistant to both Urshifu single strike stabs right there with Dark and Fighting. So while Unseen Fist could be a problem from Urshifu, single strike can't hit us with its stabs. And Rapid Strike, while it can hit us with Surging Strikes and get a guaranteed crit off of water type damage, the nice thing is you can still Terrastallize to account for that if you really wanted to. Then we have Tailwind. Whether or not we want Zapdos to set that is also a question. It's kind of a nice option to have there as a move slot, and then that way, if you want Zapdos to set it, you can set it. But if you want Zapdos' partner to set it, you could also do that. It could be also flexible where you could run maybe, say, Taunt instead. Taunt would lock your opponent out of status moves for 3 turns, which is really nice. You could run, say, maybe Quick Guard, and then depending on if you know your speed numbers right there, you could potentially protect yourself from a Fake Out if you don't want to take that. If your opponent is going to aim for Zapdos' partner, you could potentially protect them with a Quick Guard. You could also run some different damaging moves too if you don't want to run the support option with either Taunt, Quick Guard, or Tailwind. You could run Stomping Tantrum if you wanted to. There's some ground type damage if you wanted to as well. You could also slap Close Combat on there if you wanted to have an extra boost of fighting type damage right there. I meant to say burst, but anyways, if you wanted like that little extra burst of fighting type damage, you could go with Close Combat. It's a base 120 fighting type move that would also benefit from Stab, which is really handy. Unfortunately, they did do Galarian Zapdos dirty because it did get Blaze Kick in Generation 8. Unfortunately, it doesn't get Blaze Kick in Generation 9, but Blaze Kick would have been really nice, which, on that note, let's go into some Terra options right there. So Terra Fighting would be nice on Galarian Zapdos because then you do gain double stab on Thunderous Kick or Close Combat. Terra Flying would be nice for Brave Bird. On top of that, you could go Terra Fire if you did want to get burned. And you could run Fire type Terra Blast if you really wanted to. Terra Ground would protect you from Regieleki and Electro Web, which could be handy, especially if you don't get your Tailwind up in time. That would be a nice means of keeping Zapdos safe from the electric type damage that its flying type makes it weak to. That's also something to keep in mind. Now, as far as your items go, I do have a Focus Sash, which would keep Zapdos alive, and this would be handy if you're running Tailwind and decide that you want to go with the Tailwind with Zapdos. And so long as you don't get doubled up on, Zapdos would be able to successfully get the Tailwind up and then provide speed for its partner. Now, you could also make the case for a Life Orb, and if you run a Life Orb, you're increasing your damage by 30% at a cost of 1/10 of your HP in recoil, so that's not too bad. You'd be able to increase the power of Thunderous Kick, which would be nice. You'd be able to increase Brave Bird. Stomping Tantrum would be another move that would benefit from having a Life Orb. You could also run Trailblaze on Zapdos, which would increase your speed, and on a Life Orb set, that could be handy because then that way you can change between your moves, because Trailblaze isn't the strongest move out there. It's only base 50 power, but it's a guaranteed speed boost, which is relatively handy to have. Now, another thing you could do is you could also run a Choice Band if you just wanted to get rid of Protect and Tailwind. Now, for a 50% boost to your damage at the cost of locking yourself into a move, you could do that. And what I would recommend there is instead of Protect here, we'd run, say, Stomping Tantrum for some ground type coverage, and then we could run Close Combat, and then that way we could choose between Thunderous Kick and Close Combat. And honestly, if this is my preference, I would rather run Thunderous Kick over Close Combat, and then that way, instead of lowering my own defenses, I'm lowering my opponent's defenses. Because the nice thing is maybe if you're running, say, like maybe Mousehold next to Zapdos, you not only have redirection support with Follow Me, but Pop Bomb would be relatively nice going into a -1 target right there. Now, another thing you could do is, Like I mentioned, you could run the Trailblaze, but you could also run, say, maybe Facade, and then that way, if you do get burned and you're not running Terrifier, at least you have a move that's doubling in power by being burned. You could have that to flip the advantage right there. Zapdos also gets Low Kick, which there are a lot of heavy Pokemon out there too, so in some cases Low Kick could hit the same base power as Close Combat, which could be relatively nice. And then on top of that too, Terra Blast plus a Choice Band if you're Terastallized could be scary as well. So that's what I was thinking for the first set right there. So just before we jump away from this first set and get into the second set, I do want to point out the fact that I did mention that there are other ways of increasing Zapdos' attack output without having to rely on Defiant. And while Thunderous Kick was the main option with its defense debuff into the target, another means of increasing your firepower right there is Helping Hand, and have Zapdos' partner go for Helping Hand, and then Zapdos can just get a 50% boost into its damage right there with its next move. So what you might be wondering here too, because I did mention with the first set, if you're potentially using a partner with Tailwind, well, is there any way of telling whether or not you can get something with Helping Hand and Tailwind without having to go through and manually search it? And yes, there is. If you go into PokemonDB.net, which I've talked about this website before, where you can use it for type coverage checking as well, what you do is you go to Game Mechanics, you go to Moveset Searcher right here, and from here, what you can do is you can type in some moves and then hit find, and then that way it tells you what Pokemon get this. So for example, maybe you want to look into what gets Helping Hand and Tailwind together. You type in Tailwind. I already have Helping Hand populated. You hit find, enter that in, and here you go. There's some Pokemon that get access to both of those moves. Maybe you want to run Fake Out and instead of Tailwind, or actually, let's take a look, see if there's a combination of all three. I doubt it, but we can try it. There is, right there, Delibird. Let it be known, Delibird has its own niche. But if you wanted to, say, run just Helping Hand and Fake Out instead of Tailwind, you just type in Fake Out right here, and there you go. There's the list. There's the Tinkatongue line, the Raichu line, Persian, Toxicroak, Weavile, Pawmot. You get the idea. So that's something just to keep in mind for when you're team building around and looking for partners to go with this Zapdos as well, or any Pokemon for that matter. Okay, so for our second set, what I was thinking of is we can use Grassy Seed and Acrobatics on Zapdos. So the main idea here is, what we can do here is we can bring Rillaboom as our partner. With Grassy Surge, we activate the grassy terrain. That in turn activates our Grassy Seed. Zapdos gets a +1 to its defense, and its item now gets consumed. Because the item is consumed, we now gain double power on our Acrobatics, and we already have Stab on top of that. So Acrobatics is going to just hit like an absolute truck. Because we also already have Stab on it, we don't need to go too far and go with Terra Flying. We can actually go with Terra Fire, so we don't have to worry about getting burned. On top of that, if we wanted to, we could go Terra Grass. We wouldn't have to worry about getting put to sleep with Spore. On top of that, we have Thunderous Kick to soften things up like I talked about in the first set, and then we have Trailblaze to increase our speed. If we go Terra Grass, we now gain Stab on that. If we go Terra Fire, we don't have to worry too much about that because Grassy Terrain does give grass type attacks for grounded Pokemon a 30% boost. It's basically like a free life orb, so it's better than nothing. And while it isn't quite the same as Stab, it's still a good amount added on right there. We increase our speed, and from there, what I was thinking is, we're already at +1 on our defense, which means we have an extra 55 points. We can make the case for Adamant with the 194, because we're not outspeeding Regieleki or anything like that at +1 speed. We need to be at +2 minimum, so we could just go for the extra damage if we really wanted to, and then just go 152 speed. We could have a Tailwind partner in the back, because Rillaboom could always go with U-turn to get out of there, and then bring in something with redirection support or Tailwind. And the other thing too is we could technically do this with Indeedee and the Psychic Seed as well. And the nice thing there is then we don't have to worry about priority moves. Indeedee can use Follow Me to redirect attacks if we wanted to. Now, our third set is also going to be a Grassy Seed / Psychic Seed set. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Bulk Up. So Bulk Up increases our attack and defense 1 stage each. That's handy. Now we have Acrobatics, which is also getting double power from the seed being activated. We have Thunderous Kick to still soften things up. And from there, what we do is we invest heavily into our HP. We go maybe 20 into our attack, 12 into our defense. We hit 148 and 112. If we're running Grassy Seed, we're getting up to +2 with our first bulk up because of the Grassy Seed. If we're Psychic Seed, well, now we're getting a +1 into our special defense, and I kind of like the Psychic Seed idea a little bit better, because what we do here is we have 76 and a Careful Nature to hit 132. We get a 50% boost from the Psychic Seed. Bulk Up's already going to give us a 50% boost to our attack and defense right there. And then what we do with our speed is we go up to 148 points of EVs to hit 139. And what that does is that allows us to still outspeed Regieleki under Tailwind. So what I was thinking is we could use Indeedee as our partner if we want to run the Psychic Seed, and then that way what happens is Indeedee goes down from redirecting attacks. We then bring in a Tailwind setter, and whether that's a Prankster Tailwind or just a fast Tailwind right there, we go for Tailwind. Now we have a bulky Zapdos going for a +1 at minimum attack into the target, and that's just going to hit them really hard. Thunderous Kick and Acrobatics just absolutely will decimate things, especially with Thunderous Kick being able to soften them up, on top of Bulk Up increasing our offensive pressure. But anyways, guys, that's what I was thinking about Galarian Zapdos. Let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, and let's get the conversation going. Look at those monstrous feet.